Hi, this is Ron Nutter, and welcome to another edition of TechBytes with Ron Nutter. In this episode, I'll get it right here in a moment, I'm going to show you how to protect yourself and your smart home with something called a virtual private network. And that starts now. I spelled out VPN for a reason, because you may have not ever heard of it before, and I won't be surprised if you haven't. Typically, it is something that only businesses have used to protect remote access into the networks. But there's a whole lot more potential for it than just in the business world. For us that are working from home or are traveling, there's some things we need to think about. And let me give you, I've got several visual aids prepared this time, and hopefully this will give you a little bit better idea. I'm not going to get into a lot of the technical speak, talking about encryption and all that, because unless you're in IT, a lot of it's not going to mean anything to you and will confuse you more. And I want to make this as straightforward as I can. Now, we'll pretend this little pill container is the information you're sending. Now, it could be something you're sending to a friend in another part of the country. You could be sending it via UPS, FedEx, or you could be sending it electronically. But just think of this as the package. Well, once this leaves your possession, you've lost control of it. You don't know that if somebody has gotten into it or looked at it or whatever. You're dependent on everybody's good nature, and that's not something you can simply do anymore. Now, here's what a VPN service does. Well, we'll think of this as the VPN provider. Now, we're going to take what you're sending, doesn't matter where it's going to go, and it gets handed to the VPN service provider. Now, what's just happened here is we've taken your information and put, for what lack is a better phrase, a protective wrapper around it. Now, this can be any number of things. It could be, you could send several books or packages, whatever metaphor, widgets that you want to use. Each one will be protected by one or more of these protective wrappers. So the information is still there, but now you've got a trusted source protecting it, and you're making it that much harder for somebody to get into it. They're really going to have to work at it. And if you're dealing with a good VPN service provider, that is simply not going to happen. And so that's kind of a visual aid to help explain it a little bit more. And this is where we get into, I could spend several hours going into payload, encryption, key, rekey intervals. You don't need to worry about that. This is a good example, I think, of what a VPN can do for you and why you should look at one. Now, let's go to a little different visual, and this is going to expand out a little bit. Now, you should consider using a VPN when, basically the approach I take is anytime you're away from your home network, when you're operating on a network that you don't have control of and you don't know how it's being set up. Now, what I'm calling an open access point can be several things. It can be at your local coffee shop. It can be at the fast food restaurant. And I'm trying not to mention names because I don't want to get sued, but let's face it, they're not making money doing it, so they have no vested interest in keeping you safe. If you are at a hotel and you attach to whatever wireless network is there, and you don't have to provide a password or passphrase to get just even to attach to the wireless network. If you're at a car dealership, now this is where some of you may differ with me on, but if you go to a car dealership, and more are doing this, where they offer you free Wi-Fi, and I'm using this in air quotes for those that are listening on the podcast, then you're protected a little bit, but you don't know when the last time they changed that password is. You don't know who else has got it. You don't know if somebody's running some software that lets them sniff what's going on. There basically there's a lot we don't know about that particular situation. So what happens is when you're running a VPN client, and that's the software on your smartphone, your tablet, your streaming media receiver, there's several platforms that support this. You basically set up an encrypted connection or I'll call it a secure connection. Encryption is a more technical term. Think of it. Remember when we put your information inside this little pill bottle inside the big one? That's essentially what a VPN service does for you. So by establishing that connection from the endpoint here that you're at, whether it's laptop, smartphone, streaming media receiver, it goes right through that access point. It just sees it as a secure connection. It hits what's called a VPN server or VPN endpoint way out on the internet, well beyond where anybody locally is going to be able to have reach to, and then takes your package back out of their protective package and sends this on its way. So then it goes out to the internet. Yes, it actually is crossing through the internet here to get to this point, but it's in an encrypted form that you can't really see anything through without some very special tools in a lab situation. And the chances are so remote, if depending on the VPN service provider and the precautions they take, it could take somebody years to get into just one little package. So it's just a reasonable level of precaution. So this is basically in a nutshell what you're doing. If you are, like I said, if you're at a coffee shop, fast food restaurant, especially if you are at a conference where they have, free Wi-Fi, you have to protect yourself because you're protecting whatever device you're getting onto the VPN with. Okay, yeah, most websites are using some form of HTTPS, whether it's, if they're still using SSL, if they're using, TLS, they're up to version, 2 something now, I think, or maybe even 3. That it's all fine and good, but you can't depend on them having the latest configuration on their end. There was one of the more well-known content management systems that found out that they had a severe vulnerability in their package. They alerted all their clients the day they knew about it and had a fix for it. And to this day, there's still some people that haven't patched that. So are you willing to bet your personal information on a phone or on a streaming media receiver? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't. There's more than one provider. You'll see in the notes here, I've got 2 listed. There's PureVPN, IPVanish, and there's no one right provider, and I've dealt with both the companies and I have a lot of respect for them. The reason I like to have more than one provider is this. I have run into situations to where provider A, and I'm not going to associate a name because that doesn't apply, but one provider may have a problem getting their client software to connect through whatever firewall or network that you're on at a conference facility, hotel, coffee shop. We've already gone through the list. So having a backup one is good. It's cheap insurance. And this is what you're really doing, is you're treating this as a form of insurance to protect your information. So in this, there's no single one right provider. There's even some free ones out there. There's Proton VPN. There is TunnelBear. And several of these have free offerings to a certain traffic level. But here's the trade-off, and because some of you will say, "Oh, hey, Ron, I can get this for free." My response is, "Yeah, but what you get for free is, well, you get what you pay for. You're not going to get the fastest speeds. You're going to have some slowness, and occasionally you may have problems in connecting, just simply because there may only be so many free connection ports available on the service that you're trying to use." Now, you will hear some, if you've been doing any amount of looking at Kodi, which is a streaming, I don't want to call it an operating system, but it's an add-on that you can put to different streaming media receivers, and several of them will say, "Oh, you need to use a VPN to protect you." Well, that's probably because you're trying to get the content that you don't have a license for. But I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole in this video or podcast. I'm simply looking at this as a way to protect you. because the more you can do to protect yourself is that much more that you're going to encourage somebody who's trying to hack into your connection to go on to somebody who's better, or who's less prepared, really, is the better way to say it. And you simply can't take any chances. If you're using a Wi-Fi service provided by your ISP with whatever router or termination box they've got in your house, okay, now you're now dependent on them to make sure their stuff is patched right. That's another reason to put your important stuff inside a secure package that makes it harder for somebody to get into, because only when they have the key can they get in. And that key is changed periodically. So if they get into it now, which the last estimates I saw for the better ways of handling it, we're talking several years potentially to get the key broken or figured out where you can get in. And then that is only good for a certain period of time. And that takes a lot of equipment. So there is no, like I said, there's no one right provider, and I would encourage multiple providers, especially if you're on, the open wireless access points. And that's one where you can just attach to. You may or may not have to go through what's called a walled garden, which is a web page where you have to either put in your email address, and that's another thing, they're capturing your email address, so now they've got something to market to you against, but that's a trade-off you make when you use free VPN service. Another good reason to look at this, I had a boss one time, still talk to him to this day, and we were operating, well, it was safe to say, a 100-office network nationally across the U.S. And we got into a discussion about security. Oh, our voice phone system is secure. Well, with permission, I put a sniffer on the network, captured a conversation, and then played it back for him. The polite phrase to use now is he changed the color of his pants because he realized that even though it was on a corporate network, it was still potentially vulnerable. So even if you're using an email program that uses secure port numbers, and if you've had to do this, you know what I'm talking about. If it uses that, okay, that's okay, but this is better. So it's a matter of how much protection that you want to put on there and avoid problems. Even when you're paying, say, something like a credit card online, even though it's a secure website, do you know how secure their setup is? Have they applied the latest patches? Some of this we can't totally blame on the providers whose services we're using. We have to take responsibility to do this. I'm going to be showing several videos in the coming weeks, and I'm actually going to go out traveling, and I'm going to show you real world what I run into so that you've got an idea. It's not just me being a talking head on a video or doing a podcast. You'll actually experience what I am going through to set things up. And there's some tricks that I'm already anticipating because I've dealt with some of the hotel networks. And if you're trying to do something like streaming video, okay, you probably want to have a VPN on that box if it supports it. Now, it's going to slow down your connection a little bit because there is some processing that has to go on in the background to take what you're trying to get or send, put it into a secure package, and send it out or unpack it when it comes in. So there may be times you may have to make a decision on to what level of risk that you want to endure. But anyway, this is something just to think about. I've already got one video that I'm getting ready to release probably later this week, showing you how to do this on top of one of the more popular streaming media receivers. And there's other things that we need to think about, especially, I've talked about just the personal benefits for you, but if you've got smart home gear at home, you don't know what applications are doing when you talk to them out over the internet. You want to protect your equipment at home and your services at home, right? Okay, this is another reason when, even if you may be on a network that you're familiar with, you may know the company that supports it, by using a VPN, you're adding one more layer of protection to keeping things safe at home. And it's unfortunate that we have to think about that, but we're at a point in time in history that you can't always assume that everybody has the best of intentions. So please get to me with any questions. I've tried not to throw a whole lot of technical jargon at you because, as I found in the past, sometimes the same phrase or term can mean different things to different companies. And I've run across that, and trust me, it gets very confusing. But if you've got any questions, I'm going to show you practical ways of what I'm doing myself to do this. Meanwhile, you've got 2 VPN providers to look at a minimum. These are affiliate links. I do get, a small commission if you sign up for the service, but these are 2 that I found about I would have listed anyway. So that doesn't affect my situation. In fact, you will see me as we go on. I'll list some other providers that don't have that, but you also need to look at what's going to work best for you, and maybe a combination of one paid provider and one that's free. Because if you don't need the other one a whole lot, then can you justify the second provider? It depends on what you're doing. And at some point, would you rather pay a small amount now as an additional service fee, or do you want to pay more even later cleaning up what's happened? So anyway, just things to think about, and you'll see me in the next few videos where I actually show you how to do this on top of a streaming media receiver. And that's mainly to protect you if you take one with you while you're traveling. You want to make sure your credentials on that box are safe. And you want to make sure that you're encouraging somebody who's trying to hack in to go to, as they say, lower hanging fruit, somebody who's not as prepared. But anyway, this is just one of the things that we have to think about when we have a smart home, or when we're traveling, or when we're traveling with a smart home. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. Like I said, you'll see some bullet points in the show notes, either both on the podcast website, TechBytesWithRonNutter.com, or in YouTube. It's kind of sparse, but it's sparse for a reason, because there's a lot that we've got to go over, and you'll see me go into some more detail in the coming videos. But I didn't want to throw anybody into a panic, but this is something we've got to think about. Because even with the endpoint devices we're using, are those patched to the latest level? Do they have all the application updates? And this is just another tool to protect you, your family, and your smart home a little bit more. Thank you for watching. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, please consider doing so. I do appreciate every subscriber that signs up. And if you want to click the notification icon on YouTube, and that should get you notified anytime I do release a video. If you're listening to this on my podcast, I'm available on iTunes, Google Play, or Google Podcast, Stitcher, iTunes. So, this is another way you can keep up on this kind of thing. And the more we can do to protect ourselves is that much less that we have to deal with later on. Thank you so much for your time and watching the video or listening to the podcast, and we'll see you again soon.